Hello, everybody. This is Sean McCleary here, and this episode's going to be a little different than any of my other episodes. This episode's going to be about the problems with NASCAR. Why is NASCAR so bad now? Why is the ratings declining? Why is the attendance declining? And all that good stuff. So let's get started. People always question why the sponsors leaving. There's so many sponsors left in the last few years. Well, here's why. Before NASCAR's peak in the 90s, sponsors were kind of a nice thing to have. They were not needed then as a driver. And drivers with talent are able to drive unsponsored or underfunded cars and run competitively. They didn't need full-time funding. Now, here's the deal. I mean, having no sponsor, I didn't say it was a good idea. It was kind of bad if you had no sponsor. But if you drove the car successfully, and if they show that you are successful, sponsors will call you and you can afford better equipment on your car and run more competitively, because you're not going to be able to win a championship without some sort of sponsor. But then when NASCAR boomed in the 90s, sponsors were paid a lot of money on any car to advertise their products, as NASCAR during that time became the #1 spectator sport in the 90s and to the mid-2000s. If you ran well, sponsors would stay. If you didn't run well, sponsors didn't get a return on investment and eventually will leave. Today, with the ratings and attendance and viewership at its lowest than it's ever been, NASCAR lose money, and sponsors at any team will not get a return on investment. As of Jimmy Johnson, probably one of the best active cup drivers in the sport, cannot keep his low sponsor, then who can? Fielding a top cup car costs around $500,000 per race, which is around $18 million for the whole season. One of the main key with problems is NASCAR is the snowball effect with sponsorship on car development, with the reasons teams can't afford to fall back on car development. In 2005, for example, Roush, who was probably the best team at that time, had all 5 of their teams or cars into the chase, that chase format was the top 10 back then. Today, their average points finish in the last few years is 21st. Meaning today, without a sponsor, it's nearly impossible to run competitively or even field a cup car today. Roush has kind of always had a problem with sponsors, even during the sport's boom in the 90s. Like Jeff Burton, for example, in 2004, was let go from his 99 car because he had no sponsors. As of 2018, sponsor dollars are needed if you want to run competitively and run the full season. Big sponsors that stay usually, I hate to say this, are with the paid drivers. And you want to know who a paid driver is? Let me explain. Paul Menard, who is the son of Menard's owner and billionaire John Menard, has the same sponsor since joining the sport in 2003, and he is mostly mediocre to below average career, and he's still in a top ride today. Since he joined, more paid drivers got into the sport, like Austin Dillon, Ty Dillon, because they are both grandsons of Richard Childress. Austin Cindric, who is the father, whose dad works is the president of Team Penske. Cole Custer, his dad is the executive vice president of Stewart Haas. And John West Townley, who his parents own Zaxby's. And what comes worse is teams are willing to abandon their on-track success to favor a paid drivers funding their race car. Here's the deal. Now, cars back in the 90s were more speed dependent than aero dependent. I mean, the speed wasn't really, you didn't really see the speed there. It still had the open engine. It's just the aero was not there. And that package provided very good racing throughout the 90s, and the racing improved from the early to mid 2000s with the Gen 4 aerodynamics and faster speed and more side-by-side racing. Because Gen 4 had very good aerodynamics, okay? Because, you were able to pass, you were able to hang on to your car better, and also you didn't have as many problems with loose or tight or dirty air as you would with the COT. And speaking of the COT, or also known as the car tomorrow, when the car tomorrow was introduced, it came with the splitter, side force, cars were more low to the ground, and turbulent air was more reliant than the Gen 4 car. I mean, turbulent air was always there, but it was not used, like, it was not as prevalent then as it is with the Gen 5 and the Gen 6 car. Even though they thought the rear wing disturbed the turbulent air and prevented airborne crashes, it never did either of those things. And the rear wing was gone soon after that. Martinsville 2010 is when they got rid of it. The Gen 4 ride height was the way with drafting with other cars and able to make the pass. The reason why they lowered the cars like in 06 or 07 was because the cars are higher, air can get underneath the car, it can push you up and do a blowover, which of course is dangerous and you don't want that. But when in 06 and 07 when they did that, they did fix that issue and the racing was still good. Okay, there was still no problem with the racing. It was fine. It's just the cars were a little bit more safe now. So I understand that. But they kind of got overly with it when the car tomorrow came. And I'll talk about that a little later. When the car tomorrow came out, the splitter was a little bit more low to the cars a little bit more low to the ground. I mean, it was higher up the ground than it is today, but it was still not as high as the Gen 4 car was. And then when the Gen 6 came out, it was around the same until 2014. And then 2015, when the tapered spacer came in, they decided to lower the cars to the ground and shorten the spoiler. 2016, they did that all the way through 2018. As you look at the cars today, are very, very low to the ground, and the spoilers are very, very short. And these cars, you cannot get a run from somebody anymore because your car will stall and the car in front will push you away. So that's why we have awful racing with this car nowadays. Now back to the sponsors, and the cars too. Okay, cars, I'm just going to show you this picture here. Cars on the left are from the 90s and cars on the right are today's cars. Can you imagine if like all these cars raced in the same race today and all the cars on the right cost a lot more to sponsor and all the sponsors on the right were not getting return on investments unlike the 90s cars? That just makes it sad for this sport. Well, also with the unsustainable business model that we have. Now, the reason why NASCAR went into safety was because of the death of Dale Earnhardt, which was the sports legend, its icon, and it was because of safety. But let's look back. During the race, Dale's seatbelt broke. Dale wore an open-face helmet. Dale had no Hans device. And he crashed into the wall head-on. There was no safer barriers in 2001, so it was a concrete wall, and Dale took all that impact with all the stuff I just mentioned before, and that's what led to his death. If he had a full-face helmet or an unbroken seatbelt, I still think he would have been injured, but still alive. Since his death, we had good things, like the safer barriers and the Hans device, which I think are the best things that we got from the sport. But NASCAR went overly on safety with the car, the Morrow, and eventually the Gen 6 car. And they keep changing it and keep making more aero stuff on it. And what came worse in 2015, they took the speed away. In 2015, they introduced something called the tapered spacer, which is a device that limits the horsepower to 850 to 725 horsepower, which was bad because these were designed to be fast race cars. And when you take the speed away from it, it doesn't provide as good of racing, and it leads to less lead changes. Just look it up on Racing Reference, tally up all the lead changes that we had before. You'll see there is a far drop from lead changes since the tapered spacer was introduced. Trust me. The point system. Now, our first point system, or the original Winston Cup format, is where first place gets 175 points and last place gets 34 points, aka 43rd. 5 points for leading the lap, and 5 more if you lead the most laps. And whoever has the most points at the end of the season wins the championship, which most people consider the best format and the most best way to crown a champion. And then in 2004, they introduced something called the Chase, where the top 10 drivers get in, where they have a 50-point gap between first and 10th. And whoever has the most points at the end of that 10-race stretch wins the championship. 2007 to 2013 was pretty much the same, except it went from 10 drivers to 12 drivers. And then in 2011, they made a change where with the points is where 43. If you're first place, you get 43 points. If you're last, you get 1 point. 1 point for leading the lap, and 1 more if you lead the most laps. And that was an okay format. I mean, it was still not good, but it was not bad. At least it had some legitimacy to it. And I kind of like that format. But then we got this format, which is probably the worst format we've ever gotten. This knockoff format. This gimmick knockoff of NFL formats where 16 teams get in, and it's like a 3-race round, and at the end of the 3-race round, 4 drivers get eliminated. And basically but the worst part is like this win you're in deal. Okay, you can win the race regardless of any other race that happened, and you could still be in the chase. So, for example, like Austin Dillon this year, he won the Daytona 500. All he had to do was be mediocre or bad throughout the next 25 races, and he could still be in the chase. That is ridiculous. Or you have a guy that's a 30th place driver that can have 1 lucky fuel mileage win or a range shortened win, and they could still be in the chase. Or a guy that could miss some races, and they could still be in the chase. Just imagine if, like one of those ideas, were crowned as champion, especially like if the 30th place driver just lucked his way into the Final Four and he's crowned the champion. That is a big gimmick. And plus the other problem is it's too easy to make it. And like you already know like the best NASCAR stars are going to make it. I mean, they all get in. There's no competition to get in. So why don't we just go back to the top 10? At least that was kind of hard to make it. It was the best chase system we ever had. So, I mean, this gimmicky playoff format that we have now is ridiculous. NASCAR needs to get rid of it. But here's the deal with champions. Champions in NASCAR have always been about consistency, which means less DNFs and more top 10s. Luck means not make many mistakes or getting swept up in somebody else's problems. And skill, that means drive the car at any conditions. So, but today, with this format that we have, it's not really needed that anymore. Because basically, even in the rounds, if you win the first race of any round, you're already automatically in the next round. You don't have to worry about what happens in the next 2 races. That's ridiculous. Today's chase format is so forced and fake. So that's why I hate this new format. The commentators. Now, this is not as big of a problem as with any of other NASCAR problems, but, you know, and by the way, this is my opinion, so don't take it personal. I mean, this is my opinion about it, and it might not be true, but this is what I think. And if you guys don't agree, that's not my problem. And most of the commentators, especially on the NBC side, have too much favoritism and politics, with Rick Allen, Jeff Burton, and Steve Letarte, who I think are annoying and sometimes don't know what's going on or what they're talking about. On the Fox side, it's not as bad, but why did they take Jeff Hammond out? Jeff Hammond was awesome with the rules analyst. And now it's replaced with either, Andy in 2015, then Larry 2016, and now in a box filled with just CGI moments. What happened to the old-fashioned way where Jeff stood by the car and he examined it, what the problems were and how it worked? Why don't they go back to that instead of this stupid CGI that we have now? And Jeff Gordon, I don't think Jeff Gordon's that good of a commentator because he's too loud, too fake with it, and has too much favoritism. Darrell's same way. He's only in favor of one or two drivers throughout the race. I mean, that's the problem. The only good commentator that we have today is Mike Joy. Mike Joy is probably one of the most legitimate commentators, and he knows what he's talking about through most of the race. However, he is not as good as this guy right here. This man is Alan Bestwick. Alan Bestwick was the best commentator we had. He talks about the race. He has no favoritism. He has no politics. And he talks about the race in good detail. NASCAR, we need to bring this man back. Because this man is one of the best commentators I've ever seen in professional motorsports. And probably the biggest reason why the sport is declining is because of Brian France, who was the CEO and chairman of NASCAR until he was arrested for DUI and possession of oxycodone. He is the biggest reason why the sport's being ruined. Because he continues to make rule changes the fans do not like, and he keeps saying all this, and he keeps, like, on the interview, he was always fake. He's always lying, because he was asked one time about the state of the sport, and all he says was, "Oh, we're happy with everything. We're happy with the ratings." You can't hide that there's a decline. I mean, there ain't no doubt there's a decline in the sport. And either he doesn't care or he's hiding something, because that's BS right there. If it was any other owner, they would be freaking out. I'm just so glad he's out now. At least we have a good leader in the sport, Jim France, so at least he does a good job. But since 2003, he made the sport worse and worse year after year, especially from 2015 to now. Since 2015, in my opinion, the sports went way downhill. In my opinion, 2014 was the last year that I really enjoyed NASCAR. After that, it's just been mediocre to low average. It's time to make a change. It's time to figure out what the problems were. And here's a big question. Is NASCAR going to improve and recover? Or is NASCAR just going to be done and they will die? What's it going to be? Will they improve or will they just die off? We'll see in the future. That's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you next time.